Welcome to the latest edition of Summer Sports Scene. I'm Trevor Denton with Julia Adams, Reagan Griffin Jr., RG2, and Daniel Huynh. How's everyone doing today?
Pretty good.
We're doing great, Trevor. We're alive here.
We are alive. It's great to hear, Daniel. What's up, Reagan?
It's a beautiful day in Memphis, Tennessee, man.
Beautiful. It's a little cloudy here in Atlanta. It was a nice day yesterday. I miss the sunshine in California. Very jealous of you, Julia. Still in Southern California. But let's get right to it. We've got a lot to cover in sports right now, even with no sports going on. But first, some breaking news today. USC All-American hurdler Anna Cockrell She announced the creation of the UBSAA, an organization for USC Black student athletes and allies. She came out with a list of demands for the UBSAA on Twitter, including they want the USC athletic department to explicitly state that Black Lives Matter. They also want USC to promise not to retaliate if student athletes protest. And guys, almost immediately, a few hours later, the USC athletic department responded emphatically. They tweeted Black Lives Matter in all caps. And Mike Bohn announced, several lists of actions that the department is going to take. So what do you guys make of the creation of the UBSAA and how it can affect USC athletics? And then what did you make of Mike Bohn's response a little later this afternoon?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I saw it coming to some degree because I follow Anna on Instagram, and sometime last week, I believe when the protests were going on, she posted on her story saying, any Black athletes, please message me. I want to assemble this type of committee. And clearly she was able to organize this together and really get it going, which is awesome to just see an athlete like her really being the voice for the Black community, Black athletes at USC, and really taking a stand. And it was great to see that athletic director Mike Bohn responded well too, and in support and hoping to work with the UBSAA together.
I think this is a positive step forward. As we all know, African American communities for years now have been oppressed in this country. I think the voices of these athletes are well deserved, and I applaud the response Mike Bohn gave out today. It shows that he's clearly conscious of what others around him are trying to express.
Right. And I do think that it's important that we get past this idea that steps have to be taken on the behalf of, organizing something like the UBSAA in order for the organization of USC to step forward and say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to advance this cause. I would like to have seen USC kind of advance that cause without having the push of the UBSAA. But looking at the UBSAA in isolation, I think that's a beautiful idea. I think it's athletes, understanding that the power that they hold, really, they are the product of the NCAA. They are the people that hold this power. They are the people that drive this market. And in doing that, they have the majority of the power. They do have the power to kind of push things ahead and to drive these narratives. So I think it's a wonderful idea. Hats off to Anna Cockrell for pursuing it. Hats off to all the athletes that I'm sure are involved in it. And I'm excited to see what it does in the future.
Yeah, very encouraging to see Mike Bohn respond immediately and already kind of acquiesce to some of the demands they're making. It seems like he genuinely wants to have a dialogue with this new organization, created a task force himself to kind of address some of these actions. Time will tell. One telling thing in Mike Bohn's statement was, he said, we don't just want to make the first action. We want to make actions that really make meaningful long-term change. So it seems like the commitment is there. We'll see if it comes to fruition. Another, part of this that's interesting to me is I think this is part of the larger trend where we're seeing more and more college athletes feel free to use their voice, just like we've seen with professional athletes like LeBron James, among many others. Now we're seeing college athletes do the same thing. We saw Marvin Wilson at Florida State call out his own head coach for lying on Twitter about having face-to-face discussions with all the players, said that the team was going to hold out of practice unless he apologized, which he did. We also saw that at Oklahoma State. Running back Chuba Hubbard calling out his coach for wearing a shirt of a questionable news network. So we're seeing college athletes, for better or worse, use their voice more and more, using the platforms that they have. I think that's very encouraging in this athlete empowerment era. Let's move on to more breaking news in the USC athletics realm. Julia, can you tell us what the LA Times reported yesterday and what Mike Bohn is currently telling season ticket holders for USC football?
Yeah, so there is some good news for USC fans. Last night, USC Athletic Director Mike Bohn, as you mentioned, emailed season ticket holders saying that USC is preparing for a season in the fall with a reduced capacity Coliseum. So with that said, I'm wondering if you guys still think a college football season is possible with the coronavirus pandemic at this stage, and what do you think a reduced capacity Coliseum will mean for SC football come fall?
I think, I hate to be the pessimist here, but I have serious doubts that we will have a college football season because I think a second wave is imminent. There's news coming out in China that there's a spike in cases. There's also been a spike in cases here. To get a college football season, I think we need athletes back at school. But with the second wave coming, I have serious doubts that athletes will even be welcomed back on campus.
My thing is like we've seen plans already be put in place for these things to happen. And I do agree that we're seeing this trend of the disease rearing its ugly head again and coming back at a force that we saw this dip and now we're seeing it rise again. But given that the plans have already been set in place for students to come back on campus in certain colleges, I do think that we are going to see that college football season. What it looks like, I'm not sure. I don't think that it would be right to have fans in the stadiums, even if you're having that level of social distancing and saying we're going to have 2, 3, 4 seats in between each person. What if one dude wants a concession, right? Now that dude has to walk over a bunch of people to go to the stand. Like there's too many variables going on. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to have anyone in the stadium.
And something that was mentioned in the article as well that Mike Bone addresses, USC, the Coliseum isn't really fit for coronavirus-friendly social distancing. They have really tight tunnels. Everything's pretty crowded together and close. So I'm not sure how it will even work out if they do that checkerboard type seating that to allow a bunch of people in the Coliseum in general and stay safe.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to the Coliseum and been able to have 6 feet of space. I can tell you that. It's always crowded, clamped, especially going through those tunnels. I thought that was a great point by Mike Bone. So earlier, a few months ago, I was like, I couldn't imagine college football without fans. But now I need college football in my life, both for my career and just as a fan. So selfishly, I really want it to return. But I think something very discouraging here is we haven't even seen a single American Professional League return yet. I mean, we've seen a lot of plans, but nothing's really been put into action yet. And if you can't get professional athletes whose job it is to play sports you can't get them to return in a meaningful way, then how can you force student athletes to come back, if it's not safe enough for professional athletes? So I think that's very discouraging that we don't really have a blueprint yet. I think it's discouraging that a lot of schools in the SEC, they've had plans. They're starting to come back for voluntary workouts, but we've heard nothing about the Pac-12, nothing for California schools, nothing for USC. And at that point, you're starting to get really, really behind. I mean, USC plays Alabama week 1. Alabama might have an entire month of voluntary workouts on the Trojans. Like, what does that mean? Do you even want to put yourself at a competitive disadvantage? So as this thing really drags out, I think it's going to get interesting. I think at the end of the day, some of these Southeastern schools are going to find a way to play football. But I think it's going to be very different. I think not all 128 or whatever it is teams are going to play. I think you're only going to see a select few, and I would not count it out that the Pac-12 doesn't even play football at all this year, because it's going to come down to governors, legislators, and it doesn't seem like the West Coast is as quick to move back away from social distancing as some of the Southeast is in a lot of states where things are opening up, like Florida, Georgia. So I think it's going to look very different in the end. I think you're going to see only a few teams coming back to college football, but it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen in the past.
Yeah, I think it is discouraging that, especially looking at California, that Governor Newsom hasn't cleared the way for fans to return to sports stadiums, but yet USC is already emailing fans, kind of getting their hopes up. I just wonder if there's any communication there or who, Mike Bone and the rest of USC athletic department is speaking to kind of feel confident that a season will happen in the fall, because it looks like all of the signs from, what we're being told outside of USC is that this is not likely a possibility. So it just seemed that there's some confusion there.
You guys got to remember too, these players, they're technically students. They're not paid professionals. So that's an extra red tape hurdle to cross through. And like as Trevor mentioned before, there's got to be like legislation. Government's got to approve, especially with these players, because again, they're technically students. So I mean, it all hinges, and even that, not all schools in America they haven't even made a decision whether to come back in person for the fall. I know USC has, but that could easily be reversed if the disease suddenly gets worse.
Yeah, I've definitely tried to stay optimistic, hoping that we'll have college football. But I think, if the thing that bothers me is that if, professional leagues, that's 30 teams under one roof, under one commissioner. It's not really like that for college football. It's it's not very unified. There's not really one singular voice in the NCAA for college football that can lay down the law. It's conferences, individual schools. So if unified leagues can't get a season together, how is it going to happen for 130 teams across the country in college football? That's kind of where I'm at. That's why I'm feeling a little more pessimistic. But I think something that's a possibility is maybe playing in the spring if cases start going down then. I know Dr. Fauci was advising the MLB against playing deep into October, November because of worries about another spike. So, I don't know how a college football season would happen if you can't play, say, the college football playoff in January, can't play conference championships in December. So maybe we see college football join basketball in the spring. And that could be a solution. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely last week I was pretty optimistic that we'd get college football back, but just from the things I'm seeing and some of the struggles that professional leagues are having, I'm definitely starting to feel a little more weary about college football's return.
Hey man, maybe they can go the NBA route and just find a bubble to go in. I heard UFC's got something going on, so maybe they can go find something to get everybody in. In all seriousness, that is obviously that's not realistic at all. It's going to be a lot going on, and the really only way that you can justify bringing back the athletes is if you can guarantee that there is not going to be outside factors that could potentially make it easier for them to contract the virus, which there's no guarantee way to do that. These are going to be students that are going to be in classrooms. There's no way to guarantee that these guys don't have these outside factors that could potentially have the virus infiltrate into the games. You got to be testing them every day. You got to be, cleaning down the locker room essentially every time somebody walks in there. Like it doesn't seem realistic, but at the same time, we have not a lot of time, but there is some time for things to be developed. It'll be interesting to see what happens from here.
And you guys got to remember too, football, if anything, is going to be a much harder sport to manage this in a pandemic, because remember, there's in an NFL roster, there's 53 guys on the squad. So that's a lot of bodies to take care of, and inevitably a lot of contact you have to worry about.
And double that for a college football roster. I mean, you look at the sideline, it's 100+ people. How do you manage that? USC has people from Samoa, Hawaii, from the Southeast, from Texas, from California. They have people from all over the nation. You bring that together, you're bound to have some cases. I was just wondering, how would you guys feel about watching games at the Coliseum with no fans? Do you think they should pump in crowd noise, maybe have the band there? What do you think that would look like just functionally?
I mean, it's been interesting to see how some leagues, in Europe have gone creative, just kind of putting up, fake people up in the stands, so you have some sort of, something in the stands, so it's not so empty. But I'm not sure how that's going to work at some place like a Coliseum. I do think football is better, and I've said this before, than no football. So even if it would be a bummer with no fans, I would rather have the game in some capacity than not at all. But obviously, college football in particular is just so important and lenient on their fans and the fan culture and everything, and the songs, the history, the traditions, that'll really, I think, be even tougher to navigate than any other professional league, given its ties to traditionalism and, again, fan spirit and stuff. So it'll definitely be hard to imagine, but I do still think it's possible.
I mean, Julia, I think it indeed it is possible. They're trying it right now in Australia with their professional sports leagues, and you could tell. I mean, sure, it's better than nothing, but especially with a game like college football, that depends on the spirit and the crowd atmosphere. I just don't think the game would feel the same without fans, even with the noise.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel the same, but it's almost like a laugh track on like a sitcom, where it's kind of like comforting in a way. It's not really there, but it's kind of like cognitive dissonance. Reagan, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, we know this is a USC team that at least last year really thrived on that home environment. So I'm wondering what it even looks like from a football standpoint. If you don't have that momentum driving the success of the team, it could, bode not disaster, but it could, prove to be a disadvantage for a team that really thrives on its home environment like USC. There's a lot of factors moving around here, a lot of moving pieces for sure.
But I think to consider with that too is that everyone's going to be in the same boat. So, if USC doesn't have a home crowd, Alabama's not going to have a home crowd. So maybe that will level the playing field to some degree and really let the talent shine through versus really the crowd energy, which could be interesting.
I mean, crowds especially matter sorry for interrupting, especially in football, as football is a sport where every down matters, and it's much more structured than other sports that we mentioned.
Right. The environment in college football is so huge. I mean, you can't even compare, playing a game at LSU versus playing a game at Oregon State. What I was going to say is at least Oregon State won't really be affected by not having fans in the audience. I think they've been dealing with that problem for a few years now. But it really is huge for building a home field atmosphere. So I'm wondering, if you're a team like LSU, do you get more? Are you allowed to pump in more crowd noise than say like an Arkansas or an Oregon State? Like, how would that work? Can we like even the playing field somehow like that?
I mean, there's no way you'd have to go back in time and measure the decibels of the loudest. You know what I mean? There's too many. There's too many.
All the fans on a Zoom call. I don't know. There's got to be some solution here. We're all smart people.
We have to ask, guys, if we're going to advance. These are the things that matter. No, it's a funny point, but just from even a practical standpoint, it just doesn't make sense at this point in time that college football could even come back in any capacity. Let alone, not even thinking about fan noise at this point.
But what would you think about, the possibility of maybe some teams allowing fans, say, like Florida State, for instance. Florida right now is opening up. It's looking more and more likely like they'll allow large gatherings just with the trajectory of where they're going. Versus, maybe a team in California, say Stanford isn't allowed to have fans. What would you make about that kind of disparity and how that could potentially impact a college football season?
I think that would be a massively unfair standard, as we've mentioned again and again. Like fan noise, atmosphere matters way more in college football than like its pro counterpart. I mean, it would push other teams up, but like push other teams down than they expected.
So do you think the NCAA should then say, okay, if not every school can allow fans, no one's allowed to have fans, or while maybe hurting the economy of some of these schools or some of these college towns that are allowed to have fans? Should they not be able to have fans just because Stanford can't?
I mean, football, at the end of the day, college football is a sport, and thus it's a competition, and competitions should be almost all of them. All of them should be created in the most fair way possible. So that's why I really think, like, if you're gonna not allow fans, then it has to be one size fits all in this equation.
I mean, for me, it operates on a standpoint of the safety, right? And that's what matters the most here, is that, the safety of the players on the field and the safety of the potential fans in the stadium. If Stanford deems it not safe for the fans to be in the stadium, then that's Stanford's decision. And if Florida deems it safe to have fans in the stadium, I don't know why they would be able to, frankly. But if they deemed it safe, then it's really, I don't think anyone's right to come in and take that away from them. I just would hope that the people that are making those decisions are weighing the safety, not so much as like the profits or the benefits of having fans in the stadium. Let's make sure that we're keeping people safe first and foremost.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I feel like there needs to be a unified discussion on this. Again, because it's totally valid that if one team, as you mentioned, Florida State like allows for crowds, then, and Stanford doesn't, then it would be that you're allowed to and are entitled to what you believe or deem as safe. But I just think in general, it's would be unfair, and I believe it would cause unfair advantages between different teams based off of, as we know, the home advantage, the crowd advantage. And again, it just kind of comes back to like fair play in sports. And I just think that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there would be disparities and it would be unfair, but it's like, how does that really work in the NCAA and the current structure that we have? Can you really make a unilateral rule that says, that one team can allow fans, one team can't, so everyone can't have fans? Like, I think that really comes into play of you have to question right now, like, why is there no strong leadership in the NCAA? Why isn't there one commissioner of college football that can be making this decision versus it all being on a conference level? There's been many talks in the past of the Power Five forming their own like football league apart from the NCAA, and I think that would be very useful to make decisions right now instead of being constantly in limbo right now. With conferences and individual schools making their decisions based on legislation. So I think it really shows how weak the NCAA is to really make decisions in these type of situations. But we're going to go ahead and move on, stay with football news in the city of Los Angeles. Reagan, what's the news coming out of the Chargers head coach Anthony Lynn regarding Colin Kaepernick?
So we've seen, obviously, the blackballing. I think at this point it's fair to call it the blackballing of Colin Kaepernick from the NFL in light of his dealing in 2016. But in light of everything that we've seen in terms of the protests and this real shifting of the ideology of saying that, okay, we can all agree on the fact that Black Lives Matter. Now the NFL seems to be more welcoming of Colin Kaepernick back into the NFL. Might be a little bit of hypocrisy there, but that's not the discussion that we're having today. It's Colin Kaepernick is evidently, there are news. There's teams that are interested in one of them is the Los Angeles Chargers. Anthony Lynn, he's quoted as saying that teams would be dumb to not have, I'm paraphrasing here, but dumb to not have Colin Kaepernick on the list of teams or players to work out in the offseason. So there's clearly a level of interest there. Obviously they just drafted the kid Justin Herbert, but there's a need for a backup quarterback as well. You have Tyrod Taylor there; he's a little bit injury prone. It makes sense to bring in a guy like Colin Kaepernick, a proven veteran that can still, that from what we've seen, he still has talent throwing the ball. But I wanted to pose the question to you guys. Obviously, we know that the Chargers have a level of interest. What other teams in the NFL do you think would make sense to take a look at Colin Kaepernick?
I mean, I know the Chargers thing is being discussed, but I feel like Kaepernick deserves to be in a situation where, like, he's in a system where a similar type of ball is being played. So, I mean, and I think he fits best in a situation where he can come in and be a veteran experience in the locker room and potentially mentor a young quarterback. I think Arizona could be a good place for him. You know, with Kyler Murray coming in, Arizona's switching to a more mobile type of play with the quarterback, I think, and Kyler Murray being a young and up and coming rising star. I think Kaepernick being just as mobile as him could provide a good veteran presence for Murray to grow and thrive as a young QB.
I think another option, I do believe that the Chargers could be the best option on the table here, especially with Coach Anthony Lynn's praise for, Kaepernick, especially being in support of him and his message. And again, saying that'd be crazy to not give him a chance. But I think the Ravens could also be another cool option as well, just given Kaepernick's connections to Greg Roman at the San Francisco 49ers, and also just being a kind of alternative quarterback option there could be interesting to see him as well. But I don't know necessarily if, given Lamar Jackson and their talent that they have on QB there, if that's really an option. But I know for sure that Kaepernick isn't going to be the starter, as many people might also hope as well.
Yeah, in terms of fits for Colin Kaepernick, I think there's a fit on all 32 teams in the NFL, because I think if he came back to the NFL, he would immediately be the best backup quarterback. I mean, this is a guy that led the 49ers to a Super Bowl. They didn't win, but he led them to a Super Bowl. And we're not too far removed from when he was playing pretty good football for the 49ers. So I think immediately he would be one of the better quarterbacks. So, but the thing that kind of frustrates me, I respect Anthony Lynn. I think he's an incredible coach and probably an even better person off the field. I mean, the dude literally spent an off season building schools in Africa, but I'm not really sure if he's being sincere here, only because earlier this offseason, he said that the Chargers quarterback room didn't have room for Cam Newton. So you're saying if you don't have room for Cam Newton, you have room for Colin Kaepernick? I guess I'm just a little weary of all these statements that make it seem like Colin Kaepernick's coming back to the NFL. There was the workout that kind of happened in the fall. That went terribly. Then you had Pete Carroll recently saying that he regrets not signing Kaepernick in 2017. Like, what does that mean? If you really regretted it, then you would have done it in the first place in 2017 and hired him as a backup. I mean, I feel like I'm just tired of these empty statements regarding Kaepernick. Bring him back in the league or don't. He said he's on our workout list. They didn't even explicitly say he was going to get a workout. I feel like they need to stop teasing with this, stop using this as a good PR move, and really put their money where their mouth is. The next time I hear Colin Kaepernick come up and be linked to a team, I want him to be working out for that team. I want him to be signed, because it's obvious that he should be in the NFL. It's been ridiculous. I'm just a little tired of these empty statements, as much as I respect Anthony Lynn. Am I crazy for saying any of that, Reagan?
Now, I do want to bring up, and I think everything that you just said was gold, man, because it does feel a little bit facetious to an extent, right? But you guys know
Cam Newton to me is even better than Colin Kaepernick. This is a guy that won the MVP in 2015, even more of a high caliber quarterback. He said they didn't have room for him in his quarterback room. They already had Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert, Easton Stick. So why does Colin Kaepernick suddenly fit in there? I mean, I just think it's a little disingenuous coming from the Chargers right now.
I think from Anthony Lynn's perspective, when you bring in Cam Newton, that's a guy who's made it clear, and I think rightfully so, that he wants to come in and start somewhere, right? Like, that's Cam Newton's ultimate goal. I'm not going to come in and be your backup quarterback. I'm not going to come in and be your flex quarterback waiting on the dude behind me to come take my job. I'm going to come in and be your guy. So that's why it might not have been a whole lot of room for Cam Newton in Los Angeles, because you already have a guy in Justin Herbert that you're going to be grooming. Now, if you have a guy that's coming in and willing to be a backup, like I believe Colin Kaepernick is willing to be, now there's a little bit more space for you. So maybe that's where that idea is coming from in terms of there being space for Kaepernick, but not Cam Newton. With that said, though, I 100% agree that it does feel a little, especially on Pete Carroll's part, man, just to say that, I regret not signing Colin Kaepernick. Hey, man, you have the power to still do that literally right now. You could do that. There's no reason why you couldn't. So, yeah, I definitely don't want to hear – it's almost like the whole thing where you hear, the Lakers were interested in drafting De'Aaron Fox in 2000 and whatever when Lonzo Ball got drafted, or, all these Monday morning quarterback things. I'm not interested in all that. I want to see what you're going to do going forward. I want to see tangible action. I do think Colin Kaepernick is going to get a job somewhere. I do want to race to the table Philadelphia. That's my favorite team. I think that the thing when we talk about where Colin Kaepernick fits, we not only have to think about where he would fit from a schematic standpoint, but also where he would fit from a culture standpoint, right? Then you brought up Arizona, and the reason I'm a bit iffy on Arizona is that, even though Kyler Murray, he could look to Colin Kaepernick to be some sort of mentor, I just know Arizona has a little bit, as a state, I don't think he would be as welcome in Arizona, given the viewpoints that we've seen from some of the government officials within that state, as he would be in a place like Philadelphia, where we've seen guys like Malcolm Jenkins, like Michael Bennett, like Chris Long step up in the past there. Those guys, they have a pretty progressive mindset in Philly. So I think we have to focus on where Colin Kaepernick could fit. It has to fit not just from a football standpoint, but from a culture standpoint as well. He has to go somewhere where he's going to be welcomed not only by the players, but by the fans and by the city itself.
Yeah, I think touching on something that you guys mentioned earlier, both saying that, again, these teams need to take action. A lot of teams have been flirting with the idea of signing Kaepernick in the past, but I do agree that this year, and I think this coming season, is going to be different than the last, especially just given everything going on right now, the social unrest, the advocacy for the Black Lives Matter movement. It's come at a perfect time to sign Kaepernick. And I think, we've even seen the NFL openly support it. We've seen Goodell come out and encourage teams to sign him, and that's not something we've seen before. So I think it is looking positive that he will land with the team this year, that, versus what we've seen in the past with teams mentioning they'll give him a workout, but more uncertain on it. So not exactly sure where that could be yet. Again, culture, I also agree, will be very important. I still think Chargers is the best option on the table, given that Herbert could benefit from the knowledge of a guy like Colin Kaepernick, and that LA is somewhat, or some, more progressive than other places that he could sign. So I think the Chargers right now is the best option on the table.
I mean, definitely agree with some of the points you said, Julia. I just think Kaepernick I think he will eventually be signed this season. I just think the public pressure is too strong. I mean, obviously I approve of the NFL backing that Kaepernick should be signed. I mean, it's just, but then again, at the end of the day, they should have never blackballed him in the first place. Right. It was his right to speak, and it was his First Amendment. But you can't change the past, and all we can really do is hope that he does get signed and he has a fair shot at the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, you can't change the past, but the bottom line is he still hasn't been signed, and until he's signed, I just don't trust what's coming out of the NFL and saying that they support this movement and they support Colin Kaepernick until he's on an NFL team. And that's simply because of the product on the field. We saw so many starting quarterbacks go down last year, and we had to sit through watching Kyle Allen for Carolina, Devlin Hodges, and Mason Rudolph for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, are you kidding me? There's no way that Colin Kaepernick isn't better. It would be one thing if it was clearly obvious that he didn't belong in the NFL, but Kaepernick is clearly one of the top 64 quarterbacks in the NFL. You can't even really dispute that fact. Then you could even make the argument that maybe he's one of the top 32 in the NFL if you took out maybe a Gardner Minshew or what have you. So until he is on an NFL team, I just don't buy what's coming out of the NFL, because I've seen backup quarterbacks in the NFL over the last few years. And, I mean, isn't Mike Glennon still in the NFL? I mean, are you joking me? Some of these guys are clowns, and Kaepernick is obviously better. So it's time to put your money where your mouth is. Maybe as we were talking, kind of realized maybe Anthony Lynn, what he's trying to do here is generate interest in Colin Kaepernick, even if it's not for his own team. That would be a noble cause. But I'd rather see a different team that has a more realistic chance of signing Colin Kaepernick bring him in for a workout or express that interest. I'm just a little tired of the empty sentiments until I see Colin Kaepernick on a team. I'm not really going to buy any of it.
Yeah, well, something you mentioned as we were talking before was if a team signs Kaepernick, will that be mainly a PR move? That's something that you talked about beforehand. So I am curious in hearing your thoughts on that.
If I think it's look, I mean, it'll come with controversy. It'll come with a lot of supporters. But I think, if they really do want to focus, if these owners, GMs, coaches really do only care about winning, then he should be on an NFL team. You should be able to ignore either the good PR or the bad PR and realize this is a guy that can help you win football games, regardless of what he's done or stood for in the past. So I don't think it really matters if it is a PR move or it's not. I think Colin Kaepernick helps you win football games. I think it's hypocritical for teams to say, oh, we don't want to bring him in because we're focused, or believe, oh, we don't want to bring him in because we're focused on winning. We don't want those distractions. Well, this is a guy that's clearly won a lot of football games in the past, brought the 49ers to the playoffs, brought them to a Super Bowl. We've seen far more controversial people who've done explicitly bad things. Colin Kaepernick was simply standing up for what he believes in. We've seen criminals and bad people get back in the NFL because teams want to focus on winning. Literally, the Raiders, when they signed Richie Incognito, guard, last year, they said, not everyone can be choir boys. And he's in the NFL after some of the stuff that he's done, and Colin Kaepernick's not. So I don't think it really comes down to it being a good or bad PR move. I just think he's good enough to play in the NFL, so he should be in the NFL.
Not only that, but the reason, and I hate to always make it about my Eagles, but the reason that, we saw the justification of taking a guy like Jalen Hurts in the second round. Yeah, we don't need him to play quarterback right now. We have Carson Wentz, but he's great for our locker room. That's a dude that we want to come be part of our organization. He's going to be a good representation of our organization. If you want to solidify what you as an NFL franchise stand for, right? If you want to say we are okay and 100% fine in saying Black Lives Matter, we are willing to shout that at the top of our lungs. Signing Colin Kaepernick is probably the best way you could possibly signify that that's what we stand for as an organization, with the added benefit that he also helps your football team win. Like that's the end of the goal. You want to win football games, but if you have a guy that also stands for something that is right and just in the world, in addition to that, there's no reason not to sign the dude.
Yeah, absolutely. There's guys who've stood for much worse and are still in the NFL and still playing. There's no reason Kaepernick shouldn't be in the league for simply standing up for what he believes in. But Daniel, I know we've got to move on to your hot take. If you thought that got heated talking about Kaepernick, wait till you hear about what's going on with the MLB if you've been sleeping under a rock. But Daniel, what's your hot take related to the MLB and its commissioner, Rob Manfred?
Well, as we've all known for the past month or so, the MLB Players Association and Major League Baseball have gotten into a long standoff, and for the last month, and have been bickering about money. So, with that being said, a proposed 60-game season was recently proposed. We don't know if that's going to get approved, but my hot take is, I think if a season cancellation is about to come, I think that would honestly be fatal to the existence of baseball itself. I think we're talking about a sport that has struggled to get the young crowd. Statistics stats have been put out there that the sport is struggling between the 18 to 34 demographic. It's been outbeaten by their NFL and basketball counterparts, and even soccer has been competitive in that demographic itself. We're talking about a sport that has been having attendance problems for the last 10, 11 years or so. Empty crowds have become a significant issue in Major League Baseball. And with that, if you look at the 100 most famous athletes in the world, only one baseball player is on that list. Does anyone know who that is?
Trout.
No, Bryce Harper. What rank is he? He is number 97, and he's the only player on that list. He's been far outshined by his NBA and even NFL stars. So it's obvious baseball is not attracting a younger audience. Baseball is not in a position where it can deal with no exposure. Baseball is in a position where it desperately needs exposure. Remember, the median age of the average baseball player is what? 53 years old. So if the strike happens, you got to remember too, the strike in 94, at least half the season was played. And that strike still did enormous damage to the image of Major League Baseball. Add that the sport has been dealing with PR nightmare after PR nightmare for the last 20 years. I just think if there is no season, I mean, baseball needs to come to the fact. America is not in love with you anymore. So if you go, I mean, if it goes, no one's going to care. And that's terrible for the sport itself.
This sounds eerily like my last breakup. All of that. I'm with you, man. You're bringing the stats, you're bringing the facts, and bringing the hot takes. I'm with you. You know, this pandemic has caused a lot of issues for a lot of people in the country. Unemployment's at an all-time high, but it's also, you know, strangely enough, created a lot of opportunities for people. Zoom, the website that we're doing this whole show on, you know, their stock is rising. A lot of people have had opportunities to capitalize. The UFC, for instance, is getting a lot of viewership right now because they're one of the few sports going on. I think that's the opportunity that the MLB had. They had the chance to be really the first major sport to come back. They had the chance to have the most views and really engage a new audience that maybe had gotten out of touch with baseball. It really seemed like the players were on board with the plan in place to kind of be in a bubble, kind of like what the Disney World plan that we're seeing with the NBA. And then to have it all crumble due to money is just so disappointing on so many levels. That creates distrust between MLB and its fans. And I'm with you. I'm not sure this is something that can recover from. I'm totally with you, Dan.
Here's the thing, man. Like it was the issue of money. You just said it. And I'm not so sure this is the worst thing in the world. And here's why. When you have a league, right, and essentially what you had was these owners, they wanted this shortened season, and they said, well, we also don't want to pay you as much as we committed to paying you. And that's where the players took a beat, because they were willing to say, hey, we can play 73 plus games and get all of our money. The MLB said, we're not willing to pay you what we committed to paying you in the first place. And when you do that, especially in a league, right, that is not operating on a salary cap, you're operating on money that's coming from the ownership that they're committed to paying the players. That's their money, and that they sign the contract willing to pay that. So the owners have to cough up this money first and foremost. That's why the players are having all this beef with it. And the reason why I don't think it's the worst thing in the world is that I think the reason why the MLB has fallen such out of touch with its fan base is because it's not as player-oriented as it needs to be. You mentioned it, Daniel. Bryce Harper is the only top 100 most famous athlete that the MLB has. They need to have
baseball doesn't create stars. Baseball doesn't create stars.
And what creates stars, we've seen it in the NFL, in the NBA. Player power creates stars. And what we're seeing is a shift of the power right now. The MLB players are standing 10 toes and they're saying, no, give us our money. That's the NFL or the MLB players having that power. And with that power is going to come that stardom. So I think that if we see this shift continue of more power in favor of the MLB players, I think it's going to be beneficial in the long run. Maybe in the short term, if you have a lockout season where there's no MLB baseball, that's going to be painful in the short term. But in the long term, you're going to have more powerful players, which makes for more marketable players, which makes for a better on-field product. I think that this is what the MLB sorely needed, was players standing up for what they need.
Reagan, I think you're forgetting one thing. Yes, it's true. Players deserve their money and the ownership cough up. But you got to remember, we're in a setting of a global pandemic where people are constantly losing their jobs. Reagan, you can't deny the fact that if these players are multimillionaires and you're dealing with multi-billionaire owners. For the most part, both sides are going to be fine in the long run. But at the same time, they're bickering about money when people are losing their jobs. It's Reagan, I think you're forgetting something. It's a bad PR move, whatever you do, because
who's it bad on here? Is it bad on the players for wanting the money that the owners had committed to paying them, or is it bad on the owners for trying to say we're not going to give you the money that we said?
I don't think it matters. At the end of the day, you're bickering about money, something people are strapped for cash right now. It's bad no matter what you do.
The thing is, right, even when we're talking about what we were talking about, $1 or $100,000 or $100 million, right? If you committed to paying me a certain amount of money, give me my money. That this point blank period. And the players, if they saying, hey, man, you committed to giving me this amount of money, and the ownership is trying to back out of that, the ownership looks terrible. And it's completely 100% fair on the players to demand that money. And the fact that they are demanding that money shows that they understand that they hold the power here. And that's something that the MLB needed needed is players that are more powerful. The reason why the players aren't as popular or marketable is because people haven't given a crap about these players. That's point blank, period. People don't care about who's playing in the MLB right now. And right now, frankly, I'm a little bit more interested in who's driving this from the player side because I want to see these dudes who are demanding their money. I'm more interested in the MLB than I have been in my entire life right now because I'm seeing a bunch of dudes standing up for what they deserve.
Yeah, I think what this is definitely shed light on, and something that we've even seen this past year with the whole Astros scandal, is that there's definitely just a distrust of like no transparency going on between the different levels and baseball, which includes from the commissioner to owners to the different players. It just seems like there's not a tie or real working together attitude in order to accommodating each other. And again, I remember Rob Manfred, the commissioner, made a comment earlier too about, I think the World Series trophy being like a piece of, I know you guys might know this better. Like he said, like what did he say?
It's a piece of metal.
Yeah, piece of metal. So exactly. I think again, there just seems like a lack of understanding for the players, a lack of support for the players, and I think this ultimately the coronavirus has caused all of this to come to light, and it would be hard in advance to see a season happening with all of these problems underlying. Like this just, of course, allowed all of this to come to fruition, which we're seeing now. So I think it'll be crazy if there is no season, given baseball's never seen that before, and it'll definitely cause even more fan drops and franchises to get bankrupt and everything. So it's just an unfortunate space to see that baseball is in this right now. And I'm even having a hard time just understanding how they can try and get out of this.
I mean, you made a remarkable point in that this is a problem that existed in baseball way before coronavirus ever hit. And coronavirus is just showing the entire world now there's a clear disconnection between the ownership and the players, and it's the ownership's fault. And the ownership has to fix something, or else they're going to lose MLB baseball as we know it. And that's the players. What we're seeing right now is the players demanding that shift in ideology and saying, hey, give us more of the power that we deserve in this. We are the product. Again, we talked about at the beginning of the show. The players are the product. They hold the power. Without them, there is not Major League Baseball. They deserve their money. They deserve their power. I mean, that's all I have to say about that, man.
I just think at the end of the day, it's such a short-sighted way to approach things for both the commissioner and by extension, the owners, because at the end of the day, the commissioner is really not employed by the players. He's really there for the owners and to kind of be the puppet and the spokesperson for them and to protect their interests. And I think, what you've seen is these owners, they know they're probably going to lose everything in attendance costs, which is the main source of revenue for MLB. They make all their money, with 162 games. That's why the schedule is so big, so they can rake in that cash. So they're already facing the loss of revenue there. Now they're saying, I think at the end of the day, the owners don't want a season because they also want to cut out the cost of having to pay all the players and then save money that way. That's such a short-sighted decision at the end of the day for a bunch of billionaires to make, when in reality, you can take your losses now, be the only sport on TV. At the end of the day, sports are competing with each other. They're competing with movies. They're competing with music. They're competing with everything that attracts our eyeballs and entertainment. And right now, they would have little to no competition. They wouldn't have to go against the NBA Finals in the middle of their season. I think there are a lot of really young, exuberant MLB players that fans would have been able to see for the first time. A Ronald Acuna for the Braves. I mean, this is a really exciting, vocal guy that could attract a whole new generation of fans, but they completely messed up that opportunity because of short-term losses when there could have been massive long-term gain of being the only sport on TV right now. So I think it ultimately came down to greed. I mean, minor league players, a lot of MLB players are having to support minor league players in their organization. How embarrassing is that we have billion-dollar owners in the MLB worth billions of dollars, and they can't pay minor league players, and their players, the people who work for them, are having to pay minor league players. I think it's just so embarrassing. There's so much greed going around right now with the MLB.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about that.
No doubt.
So we're all in agreement. Dan, your hot take started off sizzling. There was a little dissension, but at the end of the day, we all come back to
the fact that MLB owners are greedy. That much is not to be disputed, man.
Yeah, I agree on that.
In conclusion, MLB owners are greedy. We're not going to be greedy here with your time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest edition of Summer Sports Scene. We'll be back next week. I'm sure there'll be much more to discuss and debate, more news regarding the return of college football. It seems like one week it's imminent. The next week it's impossible. We'll see what next week holds in store. Everybody continue to stay safe and healthy. Wear those masks. I haven't seen a lot of masks out lately. Please continue to wear those so we can maybe get some college football back. But we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in.